Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do my top 10 favorite horror novels by women, and this is in celebration of February being Women in Horror Month. And in order to put together this list, I did give myself a few criteria in order to narrow it down. First, I'm only allowing one book per author in order to celebrate 10 different female authors, but certainly there are some authors that I could have included a few of their books here, so I just picked out my favorites. And while this is a rank list, keep in mind that if I were to redo this video on another day, I'm sure they'd be in a slightly different order. I'm also excluding books that I read really recently, just because I do feel like there's a little bit of bias, so I like to kind of sit and wait before I officially declare a book a favorite now. And as well, I'm only including books in the adult genre, so no young adult books, even though there are a lot of fantastic female authors writing YA. And I'm only including books that are full length, so no short stories, anthologies, etc. are going to be listed here. And yeah, this was a lot of fun to put together. I'm hoping I will give you some recommendations for some new ladies to try out, some new authors to sample, and let's get started. First, at the number 10 spot, we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This book is set back in historical Mexico and follows a young socialite who goes off to check on her cousin. They have been receiving strange letters from her and are concerned she has been married off into this other wealthy family, and apparently she's quite sick. So she goes to visit her cousin and gets wrapped up into this strange family politics. You realize soon enough that there is more going on, and the story goes from there. Given the title, you can probably guess that this is Gothic fiction, which is not normally my favorite subgenre. So the fact that it's on this list is the fact that it takes the classic subgenre of Gothic fiction and goes in a direction that I really enjoyed. This book is just atmospheric. I love the main character of Noemi. She's just fierce and feminine. She loves to wear dresses and makeup, but at the same time, she is very much an independent woman who speaks her mind. And I think that if you love those elements, you'll love this one as much as I did. Silvia Moreno Garcia definitely includes more like romance in her books and all of that, but there's enough about this book that I like that it definitely earned a place among my favorites here. Then at number 9, we have Mind of Winter by Laura Kashiki. This follows a family on Christmas Day. The father goes out to fetch the relatives from the airport, leaving the wife alone with their teenage daughter. And while they are dealing with a blizzard outside, the mother just cannot stop thinking about the time when they went to Russia to adopt their child from an orphanage. And over again in her head, she keeps having this thought that something followed them home from Russia. And so the story is told both in the present day and also flashbacks to the adoption process. And like I said, repeatedly you're getting this phrase told over and over again that possibly something followed them home from Russia. This is a book that is very slow paced, it's very quiet, and it takes a while to build, and it's a book you definitely have to stick through until the end, because the end is really where the payoff is, and this book does become horror at that point. But it's not the traditional kind of horror that you would expect. It's quite different. I did not know what I was getting myself into. It definitely is a tough book that deals with some serious subject matter and will give you some emotional gut punch moments. So if that sounds good, I definitely recommend checking this one out. Then at number 8, we have Broken Monsters by Lauren Bucas. This is a story told over multiple points of view, following different people, including a detective who is looking to investigate a series of grisly murders where the victims are found sewn together with the body parts of animals. And the story also follows the young daughter of the detective as well as a journalist who is following these cases. For the most part, this book does read more like a police procedural as you are following this case, but I definitely want to preface the fact that I'm putting this on a horror list for a reason. I really like how this book came together. I've reread it since my first read through and love it even more, appreciate what the author was doing. And as long as you know what you're getting yourself into and you know that it's going to lean into horror at some point in the book, I think you'll really enjoy this one. I just think it is so well plotted with some really great character work, some really good commentary on being a female police officer in a place like Detroit, and I just, yeah, really loved it. That's why it's on this list. Then at number 7, we have The Good House by Tiana Reeve-Dew. This follows a woman who is preparing for a 4th of July party at her family home when something terrible happens and she finds her son has committed suicide. Not a spoiler, right at at the beginning of the book. From there, the story splits into two perspectives. So we have the fallout afterwards as the mother is dealing with the grief and trying to come to terms with what happened. And then we also get to hear from the son's perspective in the time leading up to his demise and what led to his suicide. This book, as you can probably guess from the setup, has some really heavy issues in it. It's very emotional, and Tiana Rouvdu does amazing character work. I really like both the mother and son's perspectives. I thought they were very realistic and relatable and complex. And while this book is normally a bit longer than the type of horror I typically reach for, because it is a really chunky book, I was completely gripped the entire time, and the ending just really pushed this book from being one that I liked to being one I loved, because I absolutely thought the ending brought everything together in a really satisfying way. I was very happy with it and just really earned a place among my favorites, and just highly recommend this one. If you have not checked it out, do not be discouraged by the length. It is well worth the time investment. Then at number 6, we have Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler, and this is set in a future where we have vampires walking the earth. The story specifically follows one vampire who appears to be in the body of a young child, but is actually a vampire in their 50s and is quite old and established. And the fact that I'm including a vampire book on this list really says a lot, because I've said in a few videos before that vampire fiction normally isn't my thing, but for me, Octavia E. Butler does it right. And part of that is the fact that while I'm putting this in a horror video, I can also include this video in a lot of my science fiction content, because it does walk the line and it plays with a science fictional explanation for why there are vampires. And I really like that, because I felt that this book did not over romanticize vampires and didn't turn it into urban fantasy, but really kept it to those horror elements. And I just liked those explanations behind it. It was disturbing. Certainly people do have issue with the fact that the main character, this vampire, does appear to be very young, but like I said, she has the mind of an adult. And so everything that happens in this book, which does include some adult content, is very consensual. And I just really love this one. I found the writing to be straightforward. I just really like her prose. And so yeah, if you're looking for a female-written vampire book, this is definitely my pick. And we've made it to the top 5. In that position, we have The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry, which is set in a small town where there are some grisly murders that start to take place. However, as the police begin to investigate, the townspeople don't seem to really care as much as they should, or perhaps are just forgetting these murders as soon as they're taking place. And the story is also a coming-of-age story, particularly a female coming-of-age story, because it centers around 2 young girls that are moving from girlhood into teenagers. One is more interested in boys, while the other is more happy to still play. And you really get to see those tensions and a lot of the issues that come about in those awkward years that I found so relatable. You also get the perspective of the younger brother, who possibly has some supernatural abilities. And I just love this story. Christina Henry is an amazing storyteller. And I will say that this is somewhat of a predictable horror story in the way that it really does play into a lot of the tropes you will see in a lot of popular books, but they are done so well that I just found this book to be incredibly comforting. I read it very quickly, and I just find it a book that I want to return to when I need to have a horror story that is of course still horrifying, but also just very familiar. And it's just done so well that I loved every moment of this book, and like I said, definitely earns a place in my top 5. Then at number 4, we have The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. This is a story told over 2 perspectives set in Vermont. Back in older times, we have a couple that after years of infertility were able to conceive a child. However, the story starts with a very tragic accident. The story is also told in the present day, following 2 sisters that are looking for their mother. And while this is on my list of horror novels, I will admit that it is a bit lighter in some of those aspects, and in times reads a little bit more like suspense, but there certainly are still moments that I found to be very disturbing, very creepy, and very psychological to a degree. So as long as you go in with the right expectations, I think you'll be very satisfied. For me, my love of this book really comes from the historical perspective. I related heavily to the couple, their need to have a child, that infertility, those challenges, their desperation, the grief, all of the elements and emotions that they felt, I have felt too, and so I really related to that. The present day story was still enjoyable, but like I said, the historical setting alone is the fact that I cannot stop thinking about this book, and it's definitely one I recommend to anyone that wants an atmospheric, chilling read. Then at number 3, we have Beneath by Christy DeMeester. This is a piece of Southern Gothic fiction that is set in a small town where a journalist goes to investigate a snake handling church. The story is also told from the perspective of a young girl who goes to have her first experience with the snake and gets bitten, and terrible things go from there. This book blends in different elements of Southern Gothic as well as cosmic horror, and just a really creepy plot involving snakes and a lot of interesting and very targeted commentary on institutionalized religion, so be aware of that. And of course, it also makes a lot of really fantastic commentary on motherhood, not always very flattering. And if you don't know, these are all themes that I just love to read, and I really like the fact that the author, Christy DeMeester, was not afraid to go there and just delve into these topics. And in another author's hand, the themes that she addresses could have gone horribly wrong, but she is so careful how she writes things. She is so thoughtful, and I just loved what she had to say. This is a book that is definitely a debut novel, but I appreciate so much about it. It is gritty and dark and disturbing and makes me uncomfortable, which, if you don't know, is one of my favorite things. I look for books that just get under my skin, that bother me, and those tend to end up on my favorites list, which is why this one is here. Then at number 2, we have Into the Drowning Deep by Mara Grant. This is a story that follows a crew that go to investigate a previous crew that went to the Marianas Trench to film a documentary, or rather a mockumentary, all about mermaids. However, the first crew never came back. Possibly mermaids are real, and so they are now sending out experts and other scientists to find out what is actually out there. And I feel like I talk about this book all the time, so I will try to keep this brief. But this is a piece of horror that really blends in a lot of elements of science fiction that I love, because it talks about the biology of the mermaids. It also gets into elements of environmentalism, talks about the conservation of the ocean, and really important topics like that. The character work is fantastic. There are an wonderful array of diverse characters brought into the crew, and great conversations around ableism and acceptance, and I just love every moment of it. And so if you're looking for a fun creature horror that is going to blend in a lot of smart elements, so it's definitely an intellectual book but also gets into some really fun and gruesome moments, I just feel like this book has it all. And there's a reason I talk about it in every single recommendations video, is because it fits into so many topics. Mara Grant is definitely one of my favorite horror authors when it comes to females, so I chose this one, but certainly I could have included some for other books on this list here. And finally, at the number 1 spot, we have Tender is the Flesh, which is a story set in a dystopian future where something happens where the meat of animals is no longer safe to consume, and so the governments allow for special meat to be developed and raised, which essentially turns out to be human meat. The story is told from the perspective of someone who works at one of these meat production plants, and at the beginning of the story, he is gifted a prize meat specimen, or a female, to do what he wants with, and the story goes from there. This is easily one of the most dark and disturbing and messed up horror books I've ever read, and it's also one of the most unique. I really haven't read much like it because it goes to different places, and while I admit that I still am a meat eater today, it certainly is a book that will make you reconsider or think about your own consumption around meat products, but I feel like it did it in a way that never felt preachy. Instead, it's just really disturbing and will really make you think. It is very well written. I found the prose to be fantastic. It is a translated work, but I don't think it suffers from it. In fact, I honestly think it's some of the best writing I've seen in the genre, and I just adore this one. So if you are looking for another book to check out, I cannot recommend this one enough. I feel like I'm always talking about it, but it's for a very good reason. Highly recommend. So that is it. As of today, those are my top 10 horror books written by female authors. I would love to hear down below if I've added any books to your own TBR, and also let me know what is your favorite horror novel written by a woman. I would love to check them out if I haven't already. Otherwise, I hope you're having a really good female horror month and are hopefully checking out some other books on your own. I would also love to celebrate a lot of the creators out there. I think there are a lot of fantastic female horror booktubers that are among my best friends and just people that I really respect online. And there's also a lot of female-led horror podcasts, including, of course, my favorite, Books in the Freezer. So if you're looking for more resources, I definitely recommend checking out some of those other videos I've done in the past, shouting out other channels and other content creators. But I'm just very pleased to see that horror is very much alive and well and is very much a genderless genre that really appeals to both men and women, despite what a lot of people think. Otherwise, if you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror as well as thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy. And you can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up. You can share it around online on places like Twitter, Reddit, etc. with other people that are looking for more books to read by women. And if you hit the little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.